to order at 6:05 p.m. on Wednesday, June 15th. We do have a quorum. I'm going to get a consensus from the board members that are here. Are you okay if I go ahead and run the meeting, or?
Go ahead.
Go for it. Since there's nobody else here to take that little step. The agenda was properly posted. Let's stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Public appearances, public's opportunity to speak about any subject that is not a specific agenda item. I do not see any public. First of all, welcome to the school board members and administration. Thank you for joining us again tonight. I hope this meeting is as useful as the last one was for all parties. So item number 5 is discuss shared use of parks, fields, and facilities between the village and Monona-Grove School District. I believe this, there used to be, I vaguely remember some sort of an agreement, but there doesn't seem to be any record of it anywhere. Is that right, Jennifer?
I believe you're a little off the mark. I believe that there never has been anything other than what exists between the district and the village for Glacial Drumlin and the Taylor Prairie playgrounds, which I'm not quite sure what that's all about, but I believe it was incorporated then into the Glacial Drumlin agreement.
I think so. The Glacial Drumlin was a straight up, and Jared, you've seen that, right? It was a straight user agreement. And again, it just
it doesn't. It's just the outside. It doesn't say anything about inside.
No, I mean, it's only the land.
Yes.
And it's that back piece, and it was a 15-year agreement, and that would have been in like 2007.
Yeah, there's a fair amount of time left on the agreement. So this was kind of my baby, to be honest with you, because I think it's time we do something. I think we need to get an agreement between the two bodies, because we're recreating the wheel every year.
Yeah.
So that being said, I already went out and had a meeting. Jared was kind enough to come with Jeff Schreiner and Jeff Carr, and then Matt Giese, our administrator, myself, and our parks director, Sean Brusiger. And we kind of, we're, if you will, the consensus that I felt from that group, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Jared, is we're kind of going to create the agreement over this next year while we're meeting intermittently through the year, Jeff and Sean primarily, to see what do we really do? What is the school district using of the village property? What is the village using of the school district's property? Get that year under our belt and then put the agreement together, because then we'll know that works, versus, hey, this sounds good, and then try to implement it. So I know that Jeff and Sean were planning on meeting, I have down here, they were planning on meeting, and Reese too, our rec supervisor, she does all the indoor, she deals with the indoor things of the school district's property. So meeting in June, and then Sean and Jeff meeting in August to do baseball and softball, and then February to do soccer. And then we thought we had this meeting in May, and we thought we'd reconvene in May and see where we're at. Does anybody have any thoughts?
Is there a list of what we're talking about in terms of all the parks and fields and, I mean, all the things? I mean, I was just kind of looking at the map. Is this everything shared? Is there some things that are not shared? How does that work right now?
Primarily, the district is utilizing Bakken Park. They're using Fireman's Park for baseball, Bakken for softball, and North Lawn Park is being used for soccer.
Okay, North Lawn. And
No, it's actually Bakken Soccer North Lawn softball.
Softball, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking that there's softball or baseball going on at North Lawn. And what was the third one? Bachman, North Lawn, and?
And Fireman's Park
And
for
Fireman's.
the varsity baseball plays there.
Okay. I was trying to think what fits in the village boundary. There's nothing in the town that the district is using?
I don't think so.
We don't use the kids' park or, okay. And then it's the actual school, so Taylor Prairie School, Glacial Drumlin School, Cottage Grove.
We
Those are
don't
all
use
used by the
Taylor,
village?
we don't use Taylor Prairie to the best of my knowledge because North Lawn is right there.
Here's basically what happened with Taylor Prairie. We put the freshman soccer team out there. And then realized that as it got dark, we were going to need lights. And the neighborhood strongly opposed that.
Uh-huh.
So then you guys developed that park area right there.
With the
So
shelter.
instead, we've used the park area for whatever, but we don't take the varsity soccer teams out there. But I think,
Oh, no.
Carrie,
not
I think
anymore.
Carrie's questions are good in that I think one of the things we probably need to do as a board, because we have minimally 2 still new board members who probably haven't been exposed to that.
What are we talking about?
Jeff did, we had a committee, what was that, Jared? Were you here? Had you come yet?
No.
We had a committee that really studied everything, and that's when we did the plan on the athletic facility and came up with the 1.2 million
Right.
at the high school. There was a huge committee, all the coaches were on it. You know, there's always things that you feel badly about that don't go perfectly, even with an understanding. I mean, we'll have a baseball team that all of a sudden get bumped at Fireman's by another team that's now in finals somehow, that's a village team. So Jeff is the one who absolutely, if you ask him any question, he'll tell you exactly who goes where and when and how long they use it, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And then we're using the district, the schools are being used for like rec basketball. I know
Basketball,
personally,
yeah.
and that kind of stuff.
And they do open gyms, they do the Smart, some of the Smart
Yeah.
at Taylor Prairie.
Yeah.
That's being utilized.
I think they do. Don't they do flag football out at Taylor? They used to.
No.
Used to.
They don't do flag
Right.
football. They were doing it at North Lawn,
Okay.
but then we put the softball fence up and you can't do it out there.
Oh, that's right.
Well, we had seriously talked about building a true soccer facility at Glacial Drumlin. Originally, there was going to be the softball field, and then there was going to be on one end a football soccer practice field. Do you remember that, Jennifer? You were around about that time. And they never moved forward with that. And then they decided that since football could be accommodated at the high school, then the need was for soccer. And they talked about actually building a complex out there. And they actually have a plan to do that with a money tag on that.
Right, they had talked about that a while ago.
This has to be 7 or 8 years ago.
If I remember.
Because I was on the
it
board then, but.
About the time that Glacial Drumlin opened.
Yes, that's exactly right. Actually,
It's been
yeah.
revisited since then. I mean, people have, yeah, it keeps, that idea keeps coming up.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We, since Glacial Drumlin's been built, Bakken Park, where the kids' park is, has been developed. We've got the rugby purchased part of that land, and we've got the rugby field out there. But we have, varsity girls soccer has been playing at Bakken Park, and I think it's a really good fit. We just need to get all of our arms and legs moving in the same direction, because there's no agreement. And so nobody really knows who's supposed to be doing what.
Another group that should at some point be included in the discussion probably is the soccer club.
They have been
They have been?
ongoing participants.
Okay.
They are contributing to that.
Okay.
Which club was it?
The
Monona-Grove Soccer Club.
Monona-Grove Soccer Club, yeah. Anything else to talk about shared facilities?
Does anybody have any thoughts on the plan and any objections to the way we're kind of handling it.
So Jennifer, do you think maybe we could start with, and just to get a process rolling, we could ask, I know Jeff has this because I've seen it. He may need to update it, but he'll have a list of everything that basically that his high school group uses that's village property. He has all that.
I think we have it too.
Yes.
Jeff has been very good about
But if he
communicating.
pulls that out, then we can start a resource packet, and all of us will be on the same page, and we can all say, okay, we know that the user agreement at Cottage Grove School is 15 years, we're still 7 years out or 8 years out, and basically, you've seen what happens now. So now Pee Wee football actually plays on that little strip along the edge rather than, and nobody uses the back here piece. There's still the ball stuff that went up, but nobody uses that back piece that everybody wanted.
I think there's a soccer group that's kind of come in there, and I don't think anybody there every once in a while. Nobody really knows who they are. But that's that's if it's not being programmed, if it's
Right.
not being, if there's not a process for how we're scheduling these fields, then it's just turns into chaos.
Right.
So yes, I agree. I'm new to this, but thinking that the idea of the agreement is great. I was going to defer to Dan and Jared from the business side, and does that make sense? But then the scope of the agreement, has that already been discussed? I mean, is the scope of the agreement what you just said about the prioritization for scheduling, who does certain tasks after a field is used or a building is used, like that kind of stuff? And then also, I don't know if we're paying anything to use the village-owned, I say we, I guess the school board, as the school district, paying anything to use the village properties and vice versa? I mean, I don't know anything about how those fees are worked out, but would that be part of the agreement?
For the village programs on district facilities, that's all covered by board policy. So we do not charge. And anytime it's used of facilities, the forms are completed and so on. So I think we're talking more about the district using the village facilities that we don't have user agreements.
Okay, and the board policy is sufficient for what your needs are in terms of does that work as the agreement for
No,
example,
board
not being
policy does
charged,
not
or
cover
is
that
it-
at all. Board
right?
policy is
So-
for our facilities.
So
So we need to do something that works.
yeah.
But we haven't had this discussion as a board.
No,
And I
no.
apologize for coming in late, so I missed the beginning, but before we can really even talk about anything like that, we would have to have a plan and a discussion as a full board, and we have not done that. I mean, that would, we've talked around the edges about the needs and that kind of thing, and we clearly have to start looking for some land out here for ultimately building, and whether that could ever be tied into something, or whether we do something glacial dome. And these are all options we've talked about. And I think, I don't know if I'm speaking out of turn, again, we haven't really talked about, but ideally, from the school district's point of view, we'd like to have as much control of our own facilities as we can, but, not knowing how realistic that is in long term, but that would be the ultimate goal, I think. But we just don't have it. We haven't really investigated that, or, there was a time when, I can't remember how many years it was, right after maybe my second year on the board, when the rugby field was starting to be developed, and we had discussions with them, and because there was a big press conference, I remember, and I think some of them thought the district was going to go in with them on it, but they wanted a substantial chunk of money from us, and we weren't about to tie up. We just wasn't having it, for one thing, and didn't have enough of a plan. We made that clear at the time, that we were very interested to see what would happen. But then once they moved on and they finally did develop the field, and there are some really good things happening out there, we really haven't pursued that again, so.
I would say at this point, there's nothing to bring to the board.
There really
As Jennifer
isn't, yeah.
described, the discussions are good. We need to talk about what we have in place. Because right now, as far as for the district programs, everything is working fine, other than, we're kind of all over the place, but it works great. You mentioned we have soccer at Bakken Field, the baseball at Fireman's Park, and so on. So we use, and, same thing in the city of Monona, we, use fields and tennis courts and so on. So in that respect, our programs, we have a place to put our kids, okay?
Yes.
But we don't have written user agreements for that. We have these understandings and practice that we've had in place. Okay, I think that's what we're talking about.
Yes.
That,
Okay, right.
yeah.
Yeah. Does the district have an agreement with Monona for their fields that are being utilized?
believe there's a user agreement with there as well.
Is there?
Or it's,
There is a user agreement.
I only really saw the Village of Greenwich Grove, but I think it's a long-standing.
It is, and I don't know if I've seen it. My understanding is that it's with, I don't know if it's strictly with Park and Rec, obviously, which is, governed by the city. But we have that understanding as far as using each other's facilities, so we don't charge each other. Which is the same practice as we have with, Cottage Grove.
That we can use the library there, the community center there. They don't charge the school district when we had programs there, that kind of stuff. And that's, but I'm not aware of, I don't know that I've ever seen a written agreement either. We've just done it for years.
I guess I've talked to Jeff Schreiner about it. He mentioned the agreement. I assumed it was written. Maybe it's an understanding, but I don't know that I've ever seen it.
I'm guessing that
That's a good thing to find out.
there's something that is fairly firm,
It's like our board
because
policy.
otherwise we wouldn't be scheduling WIA events on that baseball field, the big one with the lights, if there was any question. Because again, we got bumped off Fireman's twice. And then the other thing that would happen is the kids would get out there and nobody was absolutely sure where they were, and the bus wouldn't come, and we didn't have cell phones. So, but Jeff has really put a package together, and I think a great place to start. So the piece that you did miss was that Jennifer did already meet with Jeff and Jared and Sean,
And Reese and Matt.
just to kind of start putting the pieces together. And then we had that huge committee that met with all the coaches. He's got a document that shows, and all he has to do is update that document. Who's
He
where?
kind of updated it during the long range facility planning committee.
Yes.
He came in with a document down, and that's probably what
Yeah.
he shared with you. Where they all play now. He talked about how he has to send maps out to parents that come from other communities because our games are all over the place.
Yeah.
To show them where to go and that kind of thing. So.
I think that Sean and Reese and Jeff's office are working together. I don't think that there's really an issue about working together. It's just getting the process down and figuring out who's supposed to be doing what and when.
Right.
Put a process together so that both the boards, the village board and the school board, understands that if we are using property for a school activity regularly, particular sport, that there's a process that we follow when we do it, even if it's a form we fill out.
Right.
I don't know, but and that vice versa. If we're putting a little peewee football team playing games on that edge of that property, on that street side, then somebody should know.
Who runs the Pee Wee football?
To what extent does Schreiner's report to the Long Range Facility Planning Committee address or fail to address these issues?
Well, I think it addresses it in that what our practice is as far as what we're using. I think what we're talking about now is formalizing and writing with the village about what we're currently doing. I'm not an impression that we're looking at making any changes as far as use of facilities. It's just to formalize the process.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're not looking to build anything
Yeah.
we're just looking for the process.
Yeah.
We're all on the same page.
Yeah. So I think we'll let those folks work that out, and then when we have something, we'll bring to the board for consideration.
To what extent, another question, to what extent, it seems to me that's like, that's putting in concrete status quo of understandings. And then to what extent do we look out 5 years, 10 years on cooperation and facilities that have to deal with our needs as well as their projected needs?
Yeah.
That's a short-range, long-range planning type of thing, right?
Absolutely.
And then we're just, right now, we're talking about basically athletic facilities and so.
Yeah.
But we also have the issue of land for the future use. We have to, you guys, you were on that. We have, I think we have the short-range growth somewhat in hand, or resolvable, but we need to get a hold of some type of long-range plan that has option of some sort on property. We did resolve the issue with the board on the grade arrangements and that sort of thing. So is that?
Yeah, I think it's a different issue than what we're talking about here.
It seems to me we need to outline something like a 2 or 3 step set of plans, proposals, whatever.
I think, first we need to find out where we are and get it in writing, and then part of that is document can also be looking forward as to what expected future needs for those types of facilities are.
Yeah, and that's I think that's kind of a different animal.
Yeah.
That's separate from this.
Yeah.
This is just.
We got to figure out where we are first.
Right. And I mean, the people that will do it best are the people that are actually doing it. So that's where I'm kind of at with it, and where the village is kind of at with it. And I mean, we're always happy to hear thoughts from the district.
Can I just, when you envision that, are you envisioning, an agreement about where we are, but then with an annual renewal, or are you looking for more of a longer, have you thought that far
I
ahead?
haven't thought that far
Okay,
ahead.
I was just curious, yeah, okay.
I mean, given the nature of growth that's
Right.
happening and the district's long-term plans for facilities, guess not too long.
Right, well, that's what I was,
It's gonna change.
and that's why I was hoping you were, your answer was kind of what I was hoping you'd say. So, 'cause that sounds like that would work best for us too, but, okay. But yeah, it does make sense to have some more formal process.
Well, and the length of the term, like if you renew it every 2 years or something, has to be far enough out. When you're saying about the WIA agreements and stuff, I mean, you have to look at what's your
schedule
booking
games.
horizon.
Yeah.
And so you can't renew it every year if what you've already committed to is
Sure.
2 years out for the
Just
future
throw it
tournament.
in.
So there's some thinking about being able to rely on the
Right,
fact
but we
that.
might want to do it as short as, I mean, it might be 2 years, I don't know. I mean, that's not for us to decide now, that's just,
But
I
think
just want to
back
see
of
what
your
you're
mind,
thinking. on that,
yeah.
Yeah.
And I would love to host, and I think Jeff is at the same spot as I am, hosting these bigger tournaments, and that's all good exposure for the district, and I think that's great, but we gotta keep on the same page, get on the same page.
Right.
Okay, I've talked enough.
I'm
done.
Number 6, discuss residential development in the village and its impact on Monona-Grove schools. This is an item that actually Kyle Broom brought up, but I'm not sure where he is. But I do know that he's concerned about how residential expansion will affect the needs of the school district. And I know the long-range planning facilities group talked about that extensively. And I don't know where to go from there.
I'll be glad to jump in, kind of update you on what we've done since we've last met. As you know, with that committee, we had done an enrollment study with Vanderwall, which was very long range. It didn't give us real accurate data on the short term, but we know, it helped. It was more of a 20-year projection. And so since that time, we've decided that we do need better short range, more predictable, with better projections. And so we've talked about, in the past, the district had used Applied Population Lab on a regular basis. We understand there are also other groups out there that do that work as well. And so that's something that internally with our planning team at the district level, we've talked about that need. We'll be coming to the board with those discussions here in the fall about that idea and decide what we're going to do as far as that study. The biggest thing right now is we get our enrollment count in September. We've talked about this, the fluctuation of our enrollment as far as resident growth. We've had steady growth, but it's not been steady year after year. I think we've talked about this several times. 2 years ago it was about 100 new students. Last year it was only 20-some. So we'll see this September what happens over the summer. It could be 20 again, it could be 100. If all of a sudden we get 100 a couple of years in a row, yeah, we've got to move quicker. And so, but I think we'll have, so knowing what that enrollment count is this fall, and then I will be recommending to the board some sort of either, it could be as much as going back to Vanderwall, updating the study, going to probably population lab or a different group, but we need to get another study and more detailed. And then along with it, of course, would be working directly with you, as a village, to, about where you're at, not only with your plans, but how fast is it coming, what's happened, in the next 5 years, and keep that up to date.
Are you still doing the survey of children, is it 3 years old or 4 years old?
That's our school census.
Yeah.
Get it
Yeah.
in the mail.
Yeah.
That one.
Yeah.
That one.
Yeah. So that definitely is a priority for us, to try to really have as accurate a data as possible on those enrollments.
I got rid of one kid for you.
Yeah. And it gets along with that, what we've talked about since the committee has been in place, and we've talked about long-term. We know at some point we're going to need another school, but talking about until then, and what are every possible option short of building a school that we could do to accommodate growth.
What's at the top of that list?
We have the list of possibilities, but we have not prioritized. It could be anywhere from small additions, portable units, just larger class sizes. I mean, everything is on the table for how we would accommodate growth. We have to look at everything, and then because obviously the building piece is a huge, huge piece that we want to plan years out on if possible.
I think I need to at least note for the camera that the village board no longer has a quorum, but since we're just discussing, I think it's fine that we go ahead and just discuss. And if I get in trouble, I get in trouble.
No, I don't think you will.
Yeah, and there's nothing to vote on anyway. So I think the discussion is worthwhile, and I think we should continue.
Yeah.
Harvey, I think, and Jennifer has a feel for this too, that, as we move forward, we really need to be in the room with you guys, with the board. And I think a really good example of feeling that hadn't happened before, and it's so critical that it happens now. Maybe it's easier because there are clearly parents on the village board with families involved. But when we built Glacial Drumlin School, it became clear that there had not been serious discussions about the roads and what the road requirements were. And that also, that amount for the road cost was not included in the referendum amount. So that kind of thing we can do together and have those discussions, and it'll be so much more comfortable as we move forward in the time frame, understanding kind of, we've got a huge development there, we're going to pick that up, and we'll have John DeWitt put a little piece over here, and Andrew put a little piece over here, whatever works. But that was that whole road piece in the light was a huge expense, singularly paid by the district. Right.
That's my understanding. Before.
Right.
That's my understanding.
Yeah.
You're the only one that was around.
Susan. There were many discussions.
Yeah.
There are people with long memories.
But I just think it's
true.
Nobody forgets anything.
It's great. Susan always laughs at me, but it's great preventive medicine because it builds relationships to have those discussions, and then you're much closer. You may still ultimately not share the same opinion about how to go forward, but you would have had the discussion in a respectful manner, and you'd kind of know where you are rather than go, oh my gosh, you're kidding? You now have how much of that? Yeah. Sitting on top of non-referendum funding.
So I would say is going forward, last spring, Jared and I met with Matt Giese and Aaron Ruth, and they kind of, got us up to speed on where you're at. We'll continue the conversations with those two, and I think as we work with our board and looking at those future plans, I think it would be prudent that as they're starting to get in any decision-making process about those things, that we have those joint communications as well to make sure we're absolutely 100% on the same page before our board are making any decisions about any kind of buildings, and because it is going to be based, on what's happening in the village.
And a lot is happening in the village. How do you feel, Dan, if the status quo remains, where you're at a 0% increase over the summer.
Mhm.
So you open up September
Yep.
1st, and it's the same amount of kids as you left
Yep.
with in June. How do you feel our buildings are right now?
We're good. We're full, but we're
Full, but
we're okay.
good.
Yeah.
You can accommodate every
Yes.
student.
Yeah. And just
And what year is the big year? Is it like a seventh
Sev-
grade is the big
Yeah.
class? So they're
There
trying
is
to get them
some-
out of Glacial Grove.
I just happened to look at the difference
Yeah.
between my daughter's class and my son. My son's a freshman,
Mhm.
and he's got 50 more kids in his class than the outgoing seniors.
Yep.
Right.
And I think the classes are I think he is a smaller class on the bookends of his class. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah. So what we've been doing at the high school, the enrollments have been varying, from as little as 210, up to 240, 250. And so we want to have steady enrollment in the high school. I mean, it helps keep our departments together so we're not hiring one year and laying off the next and so on. And so open enrollment works great for us, that we can balance our class sizes on that. And so, so right now we have about, the last 2 years, I think about 260 and that'll be the freshman and sophomore class, and we think that's a good number to have. And so and we'll continue that the next couple of years, because next year's 7th grade or next year's 8th grade? I keep getting that mixed up, the big bubble class. They moved to 8th?
So they moved 8th this year, so they'll
Yeah.
be next year.
Yeah, so this upcoming year's 8th grade class is the larger one. So there, when they move on to 9th grade, we won't allow as many open enrollment in. So we'll have that consistent size. And that's about, we're still in good shape at the high school that way. And as we mentioned, at Glacial Drumlin, in the short term, then they'll actually provide us a little bit of relief when that class moves through.
Right.
And we'll continue to restrict open enrollment at the lower grades so that we don't have, one of those bubbles again. The I think we've talked about this. Open enrollment at the lower grades, we're talking a couple of kids here and there just to balance class size is basically all that we've allowed in.
4K, but
Right.
that's because not all those kids stay. I mean,
Yeah.
And the other part of that, in answer to Jennifer's question that stuck with me, was when the Long Range Facilities Planning Committee toured all the schools, the one principal who I thought made a strong case for that school already being over capacity was at Taylor Prairie.
Yeah.
So if I was answering your question, I'd say the instinct that I got listening to the data presented was that Taylor Prairie is already more than comfortably full.
Yeah.
So that was a pressure point that I felt, where I think Cottage Grove School, we still felt there was classroom space to be had and space for specials, like the art space and the music space accommodates what's happening in that building. But Taylor Prairie was pressed, and so that was a takeaway for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Taylor Prairie, I mean, that's a good way to describe it, because as far as our core classrooms, the number of classrooms we have with the class size we want, we have enough space there. Is some of our specialty areas that we don't have ideal spaces. And part of it is those needs have changed over the years from the time the building was built, and so we have a full-size classroom that will split up amongst a couple specialists and so on, and to try to make those fit. So we definitely don't have ideal space for some of those programs. I think that's fair to say. Right now, we had a bump a year ago with the number of sections. We, at this point, anticipate, we're okay here for a couple of years. If all of a sudden we had a big influx of new, 5-year-olds, yeah, we'd have a real challenge.
Hi, Peter.
Sorry, I was late.
That's all
We're-
right. Better late
Something
than
happened.
never.
Something bad happened.
Actually, the discussion about the high school and everything is probably a good segue into item number 7, which is discuss locker sharing at MG schools.
Yeah.
So,
I'm just gonna let you go.
Sure. This came actually to my attention a year ago. I didn't realize for years we've had students, we have less lockers than we have students at the high school. And according to Paul Brost, we have a number of students that voluntarily, they want to share lockers. And so he asks for volunteers every year, and kids come in and it's worked. So he has not made a request for more lockers. Told them if you need them, ask, and we'll make sure we get them in. But he's, it says it's working at this point. I have not gone to the point of going through with him about where you would put them and whether we have space and that sort of thing. But
Well, I guess I'd say with that large class coming in the following, not this year, but
Yeah.
next year, that those 8th graders coming in, we should maybe start looking at that.
Yeah.
That's a school board thing.
So
But because,
can
I mean, they used to not allow kids to share lockers, but I understand they've
If a child does not want to share their locker, it's not going to be a requirement that
Correct.
they share
Right.
lockers.
Right.
Okay.
I will say this for the record, I agree, I think every child should have their own locker. And sharing, it happens, even I've been in schools where everyone is assigned and they still share on their own, and you, but I agree, that should be, so we'll, you know, put together a plan, I'll find out where we're at with that. As you said, especially if we do anticipate a little bit of additional growth at the high school.
That's wonderful news. I know a lot of moms were like,
Yeah.
wait a minute, we just passed that referendum
Yeah.
and now my kid's got to share a
I'll be
locker.
honest, I had the same initial reaction. What? We're sharing lockers?
I know that they weren't enough put in Glacial Drama in the beginning, and they had to add some.
So there we have
We
it.
may have to, we're okay there still, but
I think we added just as.
Yeah, actually, the last 2 summers we've.
I was
added-
going to say, I feel like
Okay,
we've added
so
a lot.
whenever the principal
Yeah.
requests,
Yeah, I
they're
agree with
they
that.
nominate, so.
Wait,
yeah.
interestingly, the high school population is down from where it was 10 years ago,
Mhm.
correct? So there must have been more going on in the past.
Interesting.
Yeah,
I mean, for a while, we had, more than 1,000, well over 1,000
Yeah.
students in the high school, and then now we're actually,
Well, and that's
we're
since
back
that-
to 1,000.
That's since that new building was built. We haven't had 1,000 since that new building was built. I mean, I don't think it's.
Oh,
sure.
It's been way under that. At the time it opened, it was
Sure.
well under that.
When I started on the board, there was more than 1,000.
Yeah,
I would-
don't
Because we had
think-
classes of 250, and then we had a bunch of classes of 200.
Yeah.
Our kids'
Anyway.
class is 216. I know this because I just looked at it.
Right.
I'm not that good.
yeah.
And then the sophomore class, incoming sophomore class is 266.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I'm guessing with these bigger classes coming up,
Yeah.
we might be
Yeah.
looking at that.
Could you tell me what the problems are on sharing, other than everyone having their own locker?
Well, I think privacy is a huge deal, and I'm just gonna put it out there. If drugs are found in a locker, how are you gonna tell who they belong to?
Well, and sure space. I mean, in the winter when they have heavy, not
Right.
a lot of high schools kids don't wear heavy clothes. If they choose to wear them, 'cause they're not cool, but if they choose to wear them, it's hard to get it all in there.
And they're not supposed to take their backpacks around.
Right. So they want them
where
to
are they
leave their,
supposed to put all that
right.
stuff?
I suspected these were some of I just wanted to hear.
Well, when I
Here's some of the
started at the
reasons.
middle school, it was just a problem with kids because they'd be best buddies and they'd be sharing a locker, and then all of a sudden they'd have a big falling out, and there'd be fights, and
Right.
I'd have to be calling parents to say, can you come get this child's clothing out of your child's? And
Yeah.
it just
divorce.
leads to problems. We should make sure we have enough for all
Mhm.
kids. It's, yeah.
We all know teenagers are
Right, they
level-headed.
change their minds.
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, Dan, do you have any proportion of how many students share that were that many short at the high school?
I honestly don't know.
I have no
And-
idea. This is 50 or 300?
No, it's.
Oh, no, it's way
I have
less.
no sense of
It's-
I think
proportion
more.
on this.
I'm guessing it's less than 50.
Yeah, I think it's pretty small.
Because the question you raised was on my mind as well.
Yeah.
How would you know whose contraband is in whose ever locker, and how would you resolve that if it was whatever it was?
Yeah, it can't be too many. I mean, I've had 2 kids both go through the high school, and this is the first I've heard of sharing lockers in high
Yeah.
school. So it
I
can
think
be
they
very
do, I think you're right, they do it for, I know my daughter, she had some space allotted in one friend's, because her locker was on the first floor and hers was on the third floor.
Yeah, so
It
they
just
don't-
made their
The
life
V's,
easier.
Yeah.
that's-
But I think that's a much-
You're up in the corner in the second story, and most of your classes are at the other end, you're gonna be sharing someplace.
Right. So, but I think if it's a choice, it's okay. We just should.
Yeah.
Right,
make-
choice,
yeah.
I think honestly, in the past,
Yeah.
I think the reason that Paul has made it work is just because of the budget constraints. You think, well, we can use money better elsewhere. Kids don't mind doing it.
Right.
This year, yeah, we have upped our capital projects and budget, and I don't know, if he just thought, well, it's the way we've always done it, or, but we'll follow
Probably.
up.
Well, it hasn't seemed like a priority.
Yeah.
It also sounds like it's a parent issue, maybe even more than the students
Probably.
themselves.
Oh, I'm
And-
sure
and-
it's
and so
always
that's why-
more-
Well, and that's why, so I mean that sincerely, if Paul's asking the students and they're fine with it, that's very different than the district asking the community or the
Right.
parents, how they're feeling about it. I mean,
Yeah.
Right.
who are you trying to satisfy, I guess?
Yeah.
That would probably not be high in a community survey on how to spend
No, I'm sure.
referendum money, but.
Unless
it
you
is-
ask the
but it
parents,
is
if you
obviously
ask
an
some parents,
important-
you know what,
Yeah.
Dean, I'm not sure. If you
I
ask
think-
certain parents, they might say that is a higher
Well-
priority than certain other things, because they want their kid, these are potentially students, kids who have their own bathroom. I mean, we're finding on campus that kids share less as they're coming up than even a generation ago. And so it could be parents who think, I want my kid to have their own space and no one else touching their stuff, or whatever. If they think that, in practice, their locker's on the first floor, someone else's, in practice, that's not how it works, it's the parents'
I'm just
idea of
saying,
it.
if they had alternatives to spending the same money, that may not be always the highest priority.
I don't, yeah.
Yeah. We should look
It'll
at
be
it.
interesting.
I was pretty surprised at the reactions that I was seeing. And I'll be perfectly honest with you, when I first heard this, I thought, oh, no, that's not gonna work. So I'm glad to hear that, that's your stance as well.
Item number 8, update on school referendum.
Well, when I kind of get brought in the department, Jared can go through a little bit specific about how we're doing the budget process. We talked about, with that, we kind of had our big buckets of areas that, how is it 2.6 million going to be distributed? Of course, the biggest piece was the current deficit to fill that hole of about 850,000. Actually, by the time the fiscal year came around, it actually approached closer to $1 million. And then with that, Jared, has been a very busy person these last couple of months and working really closely with all the various groups, working with Jeff Carr, obviously on the facilities piece, with the principals on their building budgets, and all the things we talked about during the referendum. We've really taken the approach of kind of a 5-year plan, that we're not going to fix everything in 1 year, trying to what are the highest priorities that we want. We had some things ready to go. We knew we needed to do, for instance, the upgrading our wireless system for our computer network was ready to go. That was a high need, and obviously that allowed us to do it. I don't know what we'd have done if we hadn't passed, because we're really in dire straits with that. The staffing piece, we went out on a limb, and I went to the board prior to the referendum vote and asked for some additional staff to lower class size or maintain class size, knowing that we couldn't wait till after the referendum. Principals putting schedules together and so on, keeping our fingers crossed it was going to pass. We would have had a hole to fill, had that not. And so the staffing piece, the maintaining the class size, or a couple sections lowering it, absolutely is a priority. We talked about the compensation plan, about trying to fund pieces of that. We're working through that. That we have to be very deliberate, because that's not just one-time money. Once you do something with salaries, it stays with us. And so it's been a lot of discussions. We had general ideas about where all those buckets were going, but really getting down to the final penny now has been the real work of doing that. So why don't I turn it over to Jared? He can kind of talk about the process he's gone through, and then how we're going to be communicating out as well here as we wrap this up.
Yep. So as Dan had said, I've met with pretty much all the stakeholders within that develop a budget or oversee a budget within the district. Obviously we had started that prior to the referendum to get some of their ideas of what their needs were. And then once the referendum was passed, now we're going back through and finalizing their departmental budgets to find out, okay, what is ideally what do you really need versus what would you like next year or the year after, because obviously we only have so much money. And then working through, obviously, getting all of our compensation in line and the new teacher compensation plan. So at the next board meeting, the board will approve a preliminary budget, because obviously the way school finance works, we don't find out our numbers until September when our students come back, and then state aid not until the middle of October. But our buildings will have a good idea of how their equipments, we obviously are focusing a lot on technology. Those are the types of things that we can get taken care of over the summer and in place before students come back, such as wireless and switches, but then also upgrading our machines, obviously getting the technology plan up to date where it needs to be at. So when we look at classrooms of iPads, classrooms of Chromebooks, teacher devices that were 6-7 years old. So those are the things that we're really focusing right now. But as we go through, we'll have our annual meeting and our budget hearing, and we'll obviously identify the amounts of money that was being sort of funneled through the referendum. So for example, when we went out and talked about the referendum, we had identified maintenance, and then we identified technology and personnel. The money that we're putting into maintenance is actually being funneled through technology to upgrade our wireless system, and then the following year, then we'll be able to fully implement some of our long-range facility plans due to the fact that the timing of the referendum was in April, in order to get contractors locked in place, they want to know that, are you sure you're going to really do this? And so in order to be able to lock in the best price, then we decided that we'll move that money that we're putting towards the wireless funding, then that will shift back over to the facility side of things to update it. But we still have our capital budget that we're still working off of, and that's lockers, updating water fountains, doors, windows, and things like that. Some of those items that were on the list, but some of the smaller items that you did not need to lock in a contractor 2, 3, 4 months in advance. So what we're also doing is working with C.G. Smits and the architects to identify what was in that long-range facility plan, and then prioritizing those. So then we will really develop a 5-year plan, and so we can say that these are the things that were identified. These are things that we want to do next budget year, but yet we have to leave a little bit of funding still there because there's always something that comes up. Specific, we'll talk about high school lockers. If we need to buy high school lockers for the following year, that's something that's not on the list right now, but that's area that we probably have to bring up, and that will be a priority. But we need to balance that and make sure that we're moving towards, along with, as the district continues to look at, if we do have to build a building, what does that grade configuration look like out here, or wherever the decision is, and then making sure that when you replace those things in the current buildings that you're not necessarily keeping it, so then in say 3 years or 4 years or whenever the building's built, then we upgraded it for students that are not even going to be there anymore, and so we're taking that into account. But definitely there will be reports that are put out not only through the district at the annual meeting, but also on the business services website, just so people see that transparency of how that money's being spent, and to help people understand, obviously it was very important to us, and so we want to be very transparent.
Well, I just came from the budget, a budget meeting for MG Sings, and I'm hoping some of the, currently the Booster Club pays for the entire transportation of the show choir to its various competitions. We pay for all the costumes. We pay for all the entrance fees. We supplement the accompanist to the tune of almost $3,000. So I'm hoping some of these things that were kind of have been eroded away over the years and become reliant. And I'm speaking from MG Sings because that's where I'm at. I'm sure that all the other booster clubs are experiencing the same thing where they're pitching in. I know the basketball boosters paid for all the uniforms for the girls, and that not just this year and years in the past. I'm hoping some of those things can, because I kind of think an accompanist is probably something that should be funded by the district. I don't think that the boosters should be supplementing that. So I'm hoping that some of that money is going to head back to the departments from the district. Is that something you're feeling?
Absolutely. Those are really good examples. And as Jared's met with the principals, with Jeff Schreiner on the athletic budget, they've tried to meet with teachers and talk about some of those things that that they have relied on boosters that maybe should be funded by the district. That's still a process to determine where that line is. I actually have asked Jeff Schreiner to coordinate a meeting with all the booster groups, athletic, extracurricular, and so on, this summer that I can attend as well, to have that exact discussion. Because when I look at it from an outside view and say, okay, we have boosters that are buying all of our athletic uniforms. To me, that's core to running the program. But on the other hand, do we simply say, okay, thank you, Booster Club, we don't need you anymore, we're going to start buying? Well, no, that's a lot of money. So what are the things that the Booster Club still can contribute? What parts should come back? With the music, that's a great example. I actually met with Lori Nehurniak just last week, and we were talking about her staffing, and I haven't had a chance to share it with Jared yet, but I will. And we talked about the accompanist piece and how that's worked over the years. And she said when she started in the district, she had someone for 3 days a week, and then through budget reductions, eventually got back to 2 days a week. And so that's what she has right now. But with that budget basically being frozen all these years, even scaled back, now the boosters have had to supplement even just to keep that 2 days a week. She said she runs out of her school money, I think about March or something like that, and the boosters picked up. So to me, absolutely, if having an accompanist is part of the core instruction, which it is, that absolutely should be paid for by the district. So the question is, What I don't know is, with the struggle, Lori and some of the other teachers, even though we passed a referendum, they may or may not have gone to the principal and said, well, here's something that, we maybe should start funding. In some cases, the principals have made those requests to Jared, others maybe not. And so we're not probably going to all fix this first year, but we'll keep that conversation. I think by year 2, we should have examined every one of those and to make it clear, okay, here's what the district's going to do, here's what we're going to rely on boosters. In my opinion, the accompanist, whatever we think is needed for the instruction, the district should pay for. And so we do have to have the conversation, should it go back to 3 or is 2 sufficient? And obviously Lori'd love to have back to 3, so that's a conversation we need to include Paul with as well and make that decision. With regard to extracurriculars, that's another tough one. I think to me, in a perfect world, the transportation at a minimum would be a good thing that the district should cover. The things like costumes, yes, you need them. How extravagant you go and how much, that's where the Boosters Club come in, I think. And that's Lori's opinion as well, that, that makes sense. So we have to have that conversation, about what are those core things that we're going to do. So my guess is some of those things will get picked up this first year, others we're going to continue the conversation.
I'd just like to add, though, too, our boosters and support of athletic and the music programs are great and greatly significant, but there are also many other extracurricular activities that maybe for a fewer number of kids that are not as visible and do not have booster support or public support are equally in need of their proportion of those kinds of things. And I think as a board member, I would certainly be very cautious of going overboard and only supporting those things in which there are boosters. And if you see what I'm getting at, because it's very easy to respond to a booster group, which could also be called the lobbying group, and we're glad they're there.
What are you trying to say, Dean?
Well, I'm trying to say you're doing your job well. And, but I think those are important things, and that's the kind of balance that, I know in my sense, I very much a supporter of the Model UN, and I contribute to the foundation in that behalf, and getting a letter from a young man, who says I couldn't have gone to San Francisco for those national finals or whatever it was. It seems to me, at least I'll lobby for that one. But on the other hand, I think we need to look at those things that do not have large contingents as well. And but again, our athletics, our music program are certainly landmarks for the district.
Well, and parents do put countless hours, and it's a little rough when you're spending. It's like when you're saving money. Saving money for a trip to Hawaii is easy. Saving money to keep the lights on is not as glamorous. So when parents are putting lots of money on it, and I get to tell them that your money is going so we can have somebody play the piano, that's a tough sell.
I was the booster for the Hockey Association for a long time, so I know what it is.
It's a thankless job.
What?
You're talking to, right, 3 boys, Dean.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, and I mean, related to that, fees that we charge parents, that's a tough one. Philosophically, I'm totally opposed to fees. Public school is supposed to be free. However, school districts can legally charge fees for certain things, and of course they have, and those fees kept going up and up as we had budget constraints. And the challenge, is that, some parents don't mind, I don't say they don't mind, but they're used to, doing that. What's just absolutely critical for us is that if we have fees, we got to make sure that the parents that can't do it, we have those waivers in place and that they know it. But that's another one that, do we lower them just because philosophically we feel we should? But on the other hand, if parents can and have the ability to, and that money can go elsewhere to help other kids, that's the challenge. So it is an opportunity for us to kind of revisit some of those, I think, and see where we're at as a district.
When we did our referendum categories, and you'd think I'd have this memorized, but I don't. There was a category that I thought included athletic uniforms.
We did
So I'm
talk
trying to
about that,
remember,
yeah.
like,
There
how-
was, no.
So we, in the first draft,
Safety
we
equipment.
talked about, we actually had
Uniforms.
uniforms
Required
listed.
helmets.
We took it off saying, well, we're not so sure we want to start, you know.
Yeah.
Because with the uniforms, what most schools have traditionally done is have a rotation. About every 4 years, buy a new set for the varsity, then those get handed down to the JVs and then to the freshmen. And then where booster clubs come in, they say, you know what, we don't want to wait 4 years. Let's raise money and get nicer ones after 2 or 3 years. And then I think as a school, then we have a challenge. Okay, now we've got 2-year-old uniforms. Why, even though on the rotation, why should we go out and buy new ones? And then eventually it just turned over to the boosters. And so I think some of the booster clubs probably gladly will continue raising money for uniforms. Others, it's a real burden that they are expected to, and that's the only way their kids are going to get them. So that's a tough conversation in trying to figure out and how are we equitable between programs. Do we purchase for some and not others? You know.
Football and hockey versus swimming.
Yeah.
A lot less uniform for a swimmer, maybe, than a football player. I
They're-
have no
they're
idea.
crazy.
Think how small they are. I know. Right, yeah, they are.
Crazy.
Well, I think that's the whole point, is we need to really look at all of our extracurricular activities and what their costs are and what their needs are and where we are with them. And then in that context, decide what makes sense to fund and what doesn't. You know, that was even a big issue when Glacial Drumlin chose the colors of red and white as opposed to blue and white, because they used to hand down all the high school uniforms went to Glacial Drumlin for those teams to use. So the coaches were very upset about that, but it was kind of a dumb thing. And
It's funny you mention that, because now I have a child who played for Glacial Drumlin this year, and all the stuff was blue. The Monona-Grove track stuff that we got was all
well, so
blue.
maybe some of us actually thought that might eventually happen.
So
because they would
it's
just
so
want to do it.
we were
but-
very
But the
satisfied
kids
by that.
voted and that at the time, and that's what happened, and it was just.
So it may have slowly
They may
evolved
slowly evolve into.
for the
blue,
necessity.
right?
Yeah.
Right.
But I'd be happy to participate in that if that's a board kind of conversation about
Absolutely.
looking at the levels of support for the different things and what's the per pupil cost in different kinds of activities.
Absolutely, that needs to go to the board. So I think that we're going to have kind of those initial discussions, and then we'll certainly have the board discussion on it. Yeah.
Fun. More to look forward to, Dan.
You definitely appreciate when you go to these different show choir competitions and see some of these schools that really do invest a lot of money in their show choirs. You know, oh my gosh, how much for those costumes?
Yeah.
You're almost distracted. How
Well,
much
some
do they
of those
cost?
schools, back when my kids were, the fees were $1,000 per kid. For the
They still
parents.
are. They still
So
are.
I'm saying that, you know, so when you see those glitzy costumes, you know, some of the schools are.
Yeah,
pretty-
one year they brought them over from India, silk costumes from India. I'm glad I didn't have to pay that bill. Right.
Well, I'm not interested in $1,000 admissions fee to extracurricular activities.
Me either.
No,
Right.
we've kept
That's
ours lower, I
crazy.
guess, by a lot.
Does the school board have anything that you want us to take back to rest of the village board?
You know, I think our main focus is, as far as the village goes, is the whole growth thing, which.
It's the what?
The growth patterns, which we just need to keep talking about and looking into, I think.
Okay.
We
I
really
have
need,
a question. Do you have a way now on your village board on a disciplined or regular basis to solicit community feedback or community input? I mean, obviously, you know, community would have the opportunity to come for a public appearance, but what about listening sessions or informal connections with people? Do you have a way or committee charged with doing that kind of work?
We have a public relations committee.
Okay.
Yeah, we're
And
putting
I'm thinking of
together.
that as the TV.
Yeah, but we're also putting together a new website too to better communicate with the community around just various means of, you know, whether you're going into the site or just presenting the information on the site. We do a family fun night. I know that Aaron and Matt in the past have had a booth there as one avenue to also solicit and engage the community. Certainly all of us trustees interact and get plenty of feedback depending on what the issue is or their concerns are from our neighbors or whoever we're interacting with. As soon as they figure out who you are, then you're on their list of folks to either call or connect with or whatever.
The
So-
parks and the police and the village itself, we have Facebook pages. Not so much for public feedback. I know parks you can't comment on, but just to put information out there at least, which may in turn spur a question or contact from
We're trying
residents.
also to record more of our meetings, more of our committee meetings, and they'll be on our YouTube channel.
Right. All of our board meetings are video. But
I hadn't thought of recording our committee meetings. That sounds ambitious.
Well,
To think
this
of the viewership.
Well, yeah, it's gotten substantially easier. And then, I mean, it used to be you didn't have, it was the broadcasting on this, but now you can
Right.
just put it up on YouTube. It's fairly
Yeah.
straightforward.
So back to
Did you vote
the
that?
PR committee, is there an opportunity, who is the chair for that right now?
That's me.
Okay, so maybe we could connect. I'm just curious because I was just appointed to our community engagement committee on the school board side. And just sort of interested, what are some best practices or things you found? Because we're talking about the same people, I mean, really.
Right.
And so how are you interfacing with them? How could we interface with them?
Absolutely.
Maybe we can connect.
Mhm.
Let me ask you, as chair of the referendum committee itself, first I want to thank you for the opportunity you gave us to get feedback from you on that meeting that night. That and similar meetings helped us not only shape our message, but I think at least our post-referendum substance too as well. And we're also very pleased that the village voted, for the referendum. Can you tell us anything that we should be aware of on our budget or our priorities, or what you heard that after our meeting and up to today on issues that relate to school and village?
I can speak from what I've heard from fellow citizens. They just want to know where the money's going, I think, is the big question they stated. So Jared had already indicated, the transparency that's being kind of laid out right now and put into place. I think that will be very key to all the citizens, whether they're here in the village or in the town or in Monona or wherever, the outskirts of the pieces of the district cover. I think that's the biggest piece for that group of folks, that they just want to know how it's being managed. Clearly, this is an issue for districts across the state. I don't know how many referendums there were for Operation. I thought it's
70.
Yeah, I was going to say 72,
Yeah, I think it was 72.
but I knew it was a large number, and so this is an issue, and hopefully some folks are hearing that at the state level, because the money isn't working the way the formulas are doing, or whatever. It's not working out for 70 or 72 districts thus far, and I suspect there'll be others that are in a similar boat coming this fall and beyond.
And this is, I mean, even prior to 2010, the formula was not keeping up with inflation. The only way to keep up was to have enrollment growth. And school districts that were not growing in enrollment were really suffering, even before, our more recent budget decisions being made at Campbell. There had been this long, slow squeeze on districts.
Yeah, particularly in northern Wisconsin, I think.
The school funding in Wisconsin peaked in '97 or so at about just under 4.5% of GDP, and now we're down to about 3.5%, and it's long, steady decline.
Harvey, maybe one of the things that as a board you might want to discuss is, so again, maybe getting periodic, I mean, this is really neat, as Dean said, that you've invited us here to be with you, and it's really nice to be able to have this opportunity and to be able to actually talk about other things again, just planning for joint use and shared use. But that whole thought about us providing a process for getting information to your board about our budget as we progress, because that'll give you the update on how the referendum funding is going. So one of the things I observed for the city of Monona, basically administration did a presentation rather than having this really nice joint conference. And Dan, I think, was at the town meeting that night, so Jared actually did that presentation. So again, giving you an update, taking that sheet with the allocations, just like you did tonight, and maybe before we go to annual meeting in October, see, that's what we did before we left here that night. We said, okay, when do you want to see us again? You said, 2 months. Okay, we'll be, you know, and this has been really nice. So maybe you come back and say to us, we'd like to see you in the second week of September as you start getting those numbers in before you have the annual meeting. So we understand what the issues are going to be rather than just looking at a sheet of paper that may or may not mean anything to you.
I think that's a really good idea.
And, I mean, then any board members that would want to come and hear your questions, that's very valuable to us. But to kind of have that be a part of what Dan and Jared do, just kind of routinely, if you're interested in that, might be something.
Yeah, you could just be aware that I've chaired the personnel committee and we deal with the salary, the discussions with the Monona-Grove Education Association and so forth. And there's a general tendency of everybody who has a stake in something, whether it's extracurricular activities or athletics and so forth. There's an awful lot of those teachers will say, "Wow, you've now struck it rich. Let's do it all this year." And I have to catch up with Dan in their last talk after the committee has met, but by and large, they've come to us very responsibly, showing great inequities between people who have same degrees and years of experience and when they came to the district. And they also talk about class size, which is remember that was a personnel category. Often I think they see personnel as teacher salary. We see it as supportive teachers in their classroom. We see it as a whole lot of other personnel related issues. But I think, as Dan outlined, that we are seeing trying to address some of the issues and problems of attracting and retaining this, at least in terms of the referendum being a 5-year thing, that this is more of a 5-year project, that it's not a 1-year project, and everybody wants a slice of the cake now, I think, or sees the money there, and why not, And I think our conversations with the teachers have come a long way in getting them to see that we can't make all of our mistakes in 1 year. We get to do it over 5 years or something like that. But it's but I think I think if all these groups or every one of these areas need to see that, because in 5 years it goes, that money's lost too. So we have to be, the salary is an issue because whatever we do in salary largely stays. Maybe you can stop some of those other categories for a while, but we have to look at what we do in the end of 5 years, because quite frankly, I don't see that, at least that assembly changing over the next 5 years to such that they will make dramatic changes in the state aid formula for schools, unless there is a real enlightenment on the road to Damascus someplace along the line.
So you think we should meet again then maybe in September?
I think that's.
I think that, again,
Jennifer?
I think Jared
Yeah, I
could
think that's
probably
fine.
give you
Okay.
some.
We'll
I
bring
think-
that to the board.
I think that would give us a great idea of, where you're
Before
at,
October.
student-wise. People are going to
You
be
have
asking.
your numbers, you know what your buildings look like. So again, giving us an idea of what you'd want to report out on, but particularly because of this community, what are your numbers? how did they meet your projections? How are the buildings functioning based on the number of students in the building? And then maybe an update on land use, shared land use. That could be 5 minutes. And then how the funds are being allocated within the categories related to the referendum prior to the budget meeting. Because few people come to that budget meeting, and this way there'd be no surprises, and we'd all be, and then plus, we can hear your questions, which are incredibly helpful. It's like going to the foundation and hearing what they say to Dan in a meeting when you're talking about the referendum or post-referendum. Those are very helpful community comments to be able to go back and respond to the community. What the entire community wants to know, because you're very representative.
I would suggest, we have our annual meeting the first week in October. Jared has a ton of preparation to do for that, for documentation. We get our, third Friday enrollment count, third Friday in September. That's the basis of our budget, and so I would say we would not be good to meet too early. We'd like to be able to have the documents ready to go that we're going to have for the annual meeting that we can share with you. So we could perhaps, if you want to meet right before the annual meeting, the last week of September, that'd be the earliest.
Well, then you have that third Friday count.
Yeah.
Like the 27th of September? Or wait, that's a Tuesday. Our calendars are funny. The 26th
A
is
meeting
the
like
last
that,
Monday.
the budget doesn't do you any good until we have the third Friday count, and those numbers are ready for the annual meeting.
So the third Friday is the 16th. So that would,
But in terms of Jared
It
preparing for
can't
the
be
annual meeting.
16.
Why don't you have Dan and Jarrett work out the date with
Well,
you
Yeah.
Somewhere in that ballpark.
somewhere in that
Yeah.
ballpark.
in that ballpark?
Just, I guess,
But I'd say
I would
pick a
suggest
date.
letting Matt and the office know what date you would be best.
Looks like
So you're
September
saying-
28th, 27th is a Tuesday, 28th is a Wednesday.
28th, we have a board meeting.
Board
And
meeting.
the Tuesday, Jennifer, you said you have what, the village has?
well, the 26th is an off Monday for us.
Oh, okay,
That's
Yeah.
why
Oh,
I
okay.
went to it.
okay.
Great.
I would say we tentatively pick a date now. I mean, it's not going to change. If we're going to meet that last week of September, that's really the only two possible dates we have, the 26th or 27th.
Right,
Yeah.
and to give Jared as much time as possible, maybe the 27th is better. I don't know.
The 26th is Monday, though. Are Tuesdays more problematic? for you?
The fourth Tuesday is our LEC meeting.
Oh.
But if that's better for Jared, maybe we can,
We'd be okay if that Monday is the 27th.
I won't be here, but-
We can always back off of that. But this way, it's like tonight, we have a date set, and we can say,
Right.
you still want to have us come?
Do we have a plan on addressing the working group on the use of facilities? You guys will get together or something?
Yeah, I mean, they had one just initial meeting, so
Okay.
we'll keep you informed.
Just keep it going.
Yeah.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn?
second.
Motion to adjourn, is there a second?
I seconded it.
Oh, okay. Not available, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye.